It was very cold toward him. But then when they wanted me here and asked me to come here, that computer kicks your number out, you're in trouble. I just wanted a little freedom. I didn't want to sound like everybody else.
Waylon Jennings, the original outlaw of country music, a man whose voice was as raw and real as the stories he sang. He was a legend who stared down the Nashville machine and flat out refused to blink. He fought for his sound, for the right to make music his way, and in doing so, he kicked the door open for a generation of artists who just didn't fit the Nashville mold. But that fight came with a few scars, and it definitely came with some strong opinions. Waylon was a man who spoke his mind, completely unfiltered. His friendships were fierce, and his loyalty was the stuff of legend, but his disdain for anything he felt was fake was just as powerful. Now, let's get one thing straight. Waylon never sat down and dictated some formal hate list for the world to see. That wasn't his style. But if you look at his life, his interviews, and his own autobiography, you get a pretty clear picture of the figures who, for one reason or another, really got under his skin. These weren't just casual disagreements. They were clashes of philosophy, art, and personality that cut to the core of what Waylon believed country music should be. So, who were they? We're about to get into the anecdotes, the public statements, and the private feuds that reveal the figures Waylon Jennings just couldn't seem to stomach. And the stories behind these rivalries might just surprise you. This isn't just a list. It's a look into the heart of a man who loved country music too much to let it be anything less than true. If one artist symbolized everything Waylon felt was going wrong with country music in the 80s and 90s, it was Garth Brooks. It's maybe the most famous of Waylon's feuds, a clash that represented a deep split in the soul of country music. On one side, you had Waylon, the hardened outlaw who fought for gritty realism. On the other, you had Garth, the megastar, who brought pop spectacle, headset microphones, and pyrotechnics to the genre. For Waylon, this wasn't just a new style. It felt like a betrayal. He saw the gloss and polish as a commercial sellout, a watering down of the raw storytelling of his heroes. Like Hank Williams, and Waylon wasn't quiet about it. His criticisms were pointed and public. For years, a particularly harsh set of quotes, supposedly from a 1994 interview, has made the rounds, where Waylon allegedly called Brooks the luckiest S.O.B. in the world, and compared his voice to Mr. Haney from the TV show Green Acres. While those exact quotes are difficult to verify, they reflect a frustration he definitely expressed elsewhere. That frustration went deeper than just the music. Waylon seemed to question Garth's very sincerity. In the book, Dreaming Out Loud, Jennings is quoted as saying, "He's the most insincere person I've ever seen." Waylon told a story of watching Garth being presented with an old Ernest Tubb record, claiming, he tried so hard to cry, but he just couldn't do it. This perceived phoniness is what seemed to bother Waylon the most. To him, country music was about bearing your soul. He saw Garth's stage show as a performance of emotion, not the real deal, leading him to predict, he thinks it's going to last forever. He's wrong. Then there's that infamous, vulgar quote that you've probably heard. Garth Brooks did for country music what pantyhose did for finger f***************. It's a line that perfectly captures the raw contempt many traditionalists felt. But while it sounds exactly like something Waylon would say, most sources now agree that quote actually belongs to another outlaw, David Allan Coe. The fact that everyone thought it was Waylon's for so long just shows how well it matched his public frustration. For his part, Garth Brooks always took the high road. He knew he was a target for the old guard's anger. In one interview, Brooks said, "Yeah, I was definitely the guy that he targeted. I just think he was addressing the different sound in country music and the changing of the guard." Garth refused to make it personal, respectfully stating, "The guy's a legend and deserves nothing but respect." In a way, Garth's polite refusal to fight back might have just proved Waylon's point. Waylon was a fighter and expected a fight. Garth's polished Iniasavi response was the opposite of the rebellious spirit Waylon cherished. This wasn't just two guys trading insults. It was a philosophical war. Waylon Jennings saw Garth Brooks as the smiling embodiment of a Nashville that had traded its soul for sales. And for an outlaw, there was no greater sin. Garth Brooks was a symbol of the industry. But one of Waylon's most painful riffs was with a man who should have been his brother-in-arms, Merle Haggard. This wasn't about music or style. This was personal. And according to Waylon, it all went sour one night over a game of poker. To get the weight of this, you have to know where Waylon was at. He tells the story in his 1996 autobiography. The year was 1969, and his life was in turmoil. He was battling a serious drug addiction, and he was reeling from a recent tragedy. A decade after he famously gave up his seat on Buddy Holly's doomed flight, tragedy hit Waylon's camp again when his drummer, Chuck Conway, was killed in an accident. Waylon was shattered and barely holding on. That it was in this dark state that he sat down for a poker game with Merle Haggard and Merle's manager, Fuzzy Owens. Poker was a ritual for these guys, but Waylon felt something was off that night. He had about $4,000 or $5,000 on him, basically all the cash he had to his name, and he lost every penny. In his own words, Waylon wrote, Merle Haggard and his manager, Fuzzy Owens, got me in a poker game and cleaned me out. Losing money was one thing, but it was the feeling behind it that stuck with him. He felt like they'd targeted him. He believed they saw his grief and his addiction and took advantage of him. They were there to get my money, Waylon stated flatly in his book. That was it. He admitted that Merle was probably in a tough spot himself, just another artist trying to make ends meet. But that didn't take away the sting of betrayal. When I was broke, they said their goodbyes and left. He recalled, I never forgot that. It was the coldness of it all, taking his last dollar and walking away from a man who was so clearly down. From that night on, a distance grew between two of country's most important figures. They maintained a professional respect. Waylon even recorded some of Merle's songs, but the potential for a deep friendship was gone. They traveled in the same circles and shared friends like Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson. But Waylon and Merle always kept a space between them. Just think of the music they could have made together. A full Waylon and Haggard album would have been legendary. But because of one poker game, because of a perceived betrayal at his lowest moment, that great collaboration never happened. For Waylon, it was a line that, once crossed, could never really be uncrossed. The outlaw movement of the 70s was built on brotherhood. It was a small circle: Waylon, Willie, Chris Christopherson, standing together against the Nashville machine. But another key figure was Tompall Glaser, the man who provided the headquarters for the revolution. His studio, Hillbilly Central, was the clubhouse where the outlaws could make music on their own terms. Waylon and Tompall weren't just collaborators. They were close friends. So what could possibly tear that alliance apart? A story as old as Nashville itself. It came down to business. Tompall was an outlaw in his own right. Hillbilly Central was his baby, a haven from the slick production of Music Row. Waylon even set up an office there. They co-produced Waylon's landmark 1973 album, Honky Tonk Heroes, a record that helped define the whole outlaw sound. Their partnership hit its peak with the 1976 compilation album, Wanted. The Outlaws, featuring tracks by Waylon Willie, Waylon's wife Jessie Coulter, and Tompall. The album became a phenomenon. It was the very first country album in history to be certified platinum. The Renegades had officially won. But success changes things. As the media latched on to the outlaw movement, the spotlight focused on Waylon and Willie. Tompall, despite being a central figure, started to feel like a footnote in his own story. Tensions rose over royalties, publishing rights, and credit. The final break was all business. Johnny Cash had apparently warned Waylon years earlier, never go into business with your friends. That warning came true. Waylon had assigned his music publishing to Glaser's company. As the money from Wanted poured in, disputes began. Waylon eventually demanded a full financial audit, a move that implied deep distrust. For Tompall, a man described as prickly and private, this was a profound insult. For Waylon, it was just protecting his bottom line. The brotherhood forged in rebellion couldn't survive the pressures of accounting. According to multiple reports, after the dispute, Waylon Jennings and Tompall Glaser's friendship was effectively over. It was a quiet tragedy at the heart of the outlaw movement. Hillbilly Central, once a symbol of unity, became a reminder of a broken partnership. Glaser watched his own solo career stumble, while Waylon and Willie became superstars. The man who helped build the clubhouse was now on the outside looking in. For Waylon, it was another painful lesson. The very movement built to fight the system had succumbed to the same cold, hard reality of money. This next one is different. It's not a story of hate or a bitter feud. Far from it. Waylon Jennings loved Johnny Cash. He called him one of his purest friends and a hero. They were brothers in the Highwaymen. So how could a man Waylon loved so deeply also be someone he fiercely criticized? Simple. Waylon didn't have a problem with John R. Cash. The man he had a problem with the myth of Johnny Cash, the outlaw rebel. To Waylon, outlaw meant one thing: fighting the Nashville system for creative control. It meant demanding to use your own band, choose your own songs, and produce your own records. Waylon and Willie Nelson nearly wrecked their careers fighting for that freedom. And in Waylon's brutally honest opinion, Johnny Cash never really did that. In a candid 1998 interview, Waylon laid it all out. When the interviewer grouped him with Willie and Johnny Cash, Waylon immediately cut him off. John's inside, he corrected. John's so inside you wouldn't believe it. He used to do everything they wanted. The shocked interviewer brought up Cash's outlaw rebel thing. Waylon's response was blunt. Trying to, he said, I don't think he knows. This wasn't a jab at his friend. It was a clarification from a man who had the battle scars to prove his own outlaw status. Waylon saw the Man in Black persona and the prison concerts as a brilliant image, but an image nonetheless. He believed that when it came to the business of making records, Cash was far more compliant with Nashville than people knew. Waylon saw the irony. He had fought the war for independence, while his friend, Johnny Cash, who largely played by the industry's rules, was celebrated as the ultimate outlaw. It was a source of deep frustration, not with his friend, but with a story that he felt was just plain wrong. He didn't hate Johnny Cash. He hated that the world didn't get the difference between them. His love for the man was undeniable. He called him his purest friend through all the years. But that friendship didn't stop him from speaking his truth about the business. For Waylon, the fight was real, and the title outlaw was earned in the trenches, not given as a costume. We've talked about individuals, but if you want to know the single entity Waylon Jennings fought his entire career, you have to look beyond a single person. The fifth name on this list isn't a singer. It's an idea, a system, a sound. The thing Waylon Jennings truly despised was the Nashville sound itself. The Nashville sound, or countrypolitan, dominated country music from the late 50s into the 70s. It was Nashville's attempt to compete with rock and roll by making country more palatable for a pop audience. They stripped away the fiddles and steel guitars and replaced them with smooth string arrangements and slick background vocals. For an artist like Waylon, this was an artistic straitjacket. When he got to Nashville, he was met with a factory system. Producers, not artists, called all the shots. They chose the songs. They hired the same session musicians for every record. They dictated the sound. Waylon was horrified. He wasn't allowed to play his own lead guitar or use his own touring band. The Wailers, he famously said, they wouldn't let you do anything. You had to dress a certain way. You had to do everything a certain way. They kept trying to destroy me. His vision was for music with a rock and roll edge. But in that Nashville, an artist with his own ideas was just a troublemaker. This system was the great villain of Waylon's story. His entire outlaw persona was born from his war against it. He constantly clashed with producers and executives at RCA. His 1975 hit, "Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way?" was a direct shot at the system, asking if the genre's founding father would even recognize the polished product Nashville was selling. In 1972, during contract renegotiations, he made his stand. He demanded full artistic control. It was an unprecedented gamble that could have blackballed him forever. But it worked. RCA agreed. That one act of rebellion blew the doors open for himself, for Willie, and for the entire outlaw movement. So while certain people drew his fire over the years, his true, lifelong enemy was the system that tried to sand him down and turn him into something he wasn't. The Nashville sound was the dragon he had to slay to become the legend he was meant to be. Waylon Jennings was a man of fierce conviction, and his story is a masterclass in the battles fought behind the music. But what do you think? Was Waylon right to be so critical, or was he just an old-timer who couldn't accept change? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you love stories about country music legends, make sure you subscribe. Waylon's supposed hate list was never really about hate. It was about a passionate, unwavering defense of what he believed was real. Whether it was the perceived insincerity of a superstar, the sting of betrayal from a friend, or the frustrating myth around his brother-in-arms. Every conflict came from his deep love for authentic country music. His greatest enemy was never a person. It was the idea that country music's soul could be polished away for profit. Waylon was a rebel with a cause, and his career was proof that standing up for your own way of doing things matters. The feuds that marked his life weren't just petty squabbles. They were the battle scars of a man who fought a war for the heart of his music. He might have been ornery, he might have been difficult, but he was always, without a doubt, true to himself. And that is the enduring legacy of the original outlaw.